Welcome to another Dragonlance Saga Hangout. It is Bakukul Pale's Wealth the 16th. My name is Adam. Today I'm being joined by Chris and Trampas to discuss the final novel in Dragonlance Destinies Trilogy titled Dragons of Eternity by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. I would like to take a moment and thank all the DL Saga members and invite you to consider becoming a member by visiting the link in the description below. There's member downloads once a month and weekly readings available, all to DL Saga members. And you can also be a patron of Dragonlance Nexus. I'm going to have to figure out a way to get the link in the description because I don't have it off the top of my head. But definitely go check out what they're doing over at DragonlanceNexus.com. And you can help support what they're doing through Patreon and through picking up the different products that they have been putting out lately, which has been significant, actually. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on and joining in this conversation.
Thank you so much. This definitely feels like which one of the three doesn't belong. We have the creator of the DL Nexus, which has been the source of the best Dragonlance website for many years. We have the creator of the DL Saga YouTube channel, which is the best channel ever made for Dragonlance, and this guy that posts comments once in a while.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, we just can't hold the candle to you, man. I mean, I tried posting a comment once, did not work.
So anyway, I appreciate being with you both.
Oh, for sure. Well, Dinah, thanks for tuning in live in chat. Rev Kev, how you doing, man? If you guys want to see some Dragonlance stuff, Rev Kev actually puts out some stuff as well. So definitely go check out his channel. He's got reviews and unboxings and all sorts of stuff like that. So check it out.
Nice.
If you like Dragonlance. If you don't like Dragonlance, I don't know what you're doing here. So, but I mean, we just had this past week, Dragons of Eternity drop. This concludes the trilogy, of which there has been rampant speculation about what Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman are going. Oh, I don't even have my book ready. Dang it. It's already on my shelf. Rampant speculation about where they're going to take the saga. Were they going to impact the timeline? There's arguments on whether or not people think they actually did retcon anything or not. I know I have my opinions. I'm going to hopefully hear both of yours. And then, just sort of talk about the story and the characters and where it went and where we would like to see it go in the future, if there's any, sort of future from this point on that Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman would even consider returning to. Because clearly, they're going back to the past with their Legends trilogy or Legacies trilogy and War Mage or War Wizard, I think is what
War Wizard.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I'm looking forward to that too. Michael, thanks for tuning in live. Anyone else? Scott, great to see you. Who wants to join in the live chat? Go ahead and throw out a shout out, say hi or something. We'll call you out. If you have any questions or comments, put them in the chat and we're going to try to get to them as well. This is an open discussion, not only amongst us three, but also all of you. So let's have some Dragonlance fun this weekend. All right, gentlemen. Dragons of Eternity. What were your initial thoughts, Trampas? What were your initial thoughts of this?
Oh, okay. So initially I'm coming into this, I'm like, okay, the trilogy thus far had some good moments, but it had some hiccups too. So little trepidation. I will say I came into this thinking that I knew kind of how the timeline would turn out, and I sort of was right.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, it's my initial thought was that the way this would end up would be to where WotC would have their continuity, which that remains true no matter what, because they've flat out said the game and novel continuity are not the same, and that's for all of their products.
Yep.
So continuity in Forgotten Realms, the RPG, the novels, the video games, all different.
And arguably that's always been the case for Dragonlance as well. They have their versions of it, and then they have the modules so we can play our versions of it. So,
right. And so my thought was that there'd be something set up to say, for everyone who's a fan of everything that came before, it's still there. You still have that timeline, but set it up to where they can kind of have their own thing too. And actually, to a degree, that's kind of what we got.
Interesting. And what about your initial thoughts, Chris, on Dragons of Eternity?
Yeah, kind of similar to it. I remember reading the book, and I was about halfway through thinking, like, man, this is just so much fun. This is just like revisiting friends that you hadn't seen in a long time. And I was like, this is exactly what I was hoping for when they announced the trilogy. And I think the disappointment of the first two were there were so many breaks in canon, particularly with Huma and the Dragon War, and just the way that whole scene played out. I think we got that out of the way, which I think was great, because going into this one, like, the problems that you had with that were in the past, and you could just enjoy the story. And I think knowing where Weiss and Hickman were coming from, how they said they wanted this trilogy to be like a love letter to the fans, you felt that it really came through the pages, and especially as you got to the end, which we won't skip to, I guess, but it was a happy ending, which you could see they wanted to do. They wanted to bring you back to meet with some friends and then end it in a good place. And I felt that as I was reading.
Yeah.
Very much, and it's like they kind of said, okay, let's have some of our greatest hits and revisit old friends, which we kind of got that in Lost Chronicles, but this felt fresh to me. It's like, this is something new, and we're seeing them in different situations. It's familiar yet different.
Yeah.
And it's kind of nice to know that at the heart of it all, the heroes of the Lance remain true to themselves, no matter which timeline they're in.
I think that's the biggest standout to me, is that I was complaining in the first two novels that Taz didn't really feel like Taz, and some of the other characters really weren't. They didn't feel like they were the version of the character that I was always familiar with and I knew last. This one felt very much true to the characters. And I don't know what the difference is, whether I just got used to how it was being written or what. But yeah, to your point, with Lost Chronicles, we knew the outcome. They weren't changing the timeline. They were filling in gaps and sort of extrapolating on ideas and stuff. In this one, there was very much, at least for me, a sense of, I have no idea where this is going. I don't know where it's going to end up. I trust that they're going to end it in a good place, but I have no idea where that's going to be. And so I was constantly sort of pleasantly surprised by the directions that it steered in. It did feel like there was like 3 different endings to this story. It felt like it just kept going a little bit longer than it really needed to.
Kind of like the Battlestar Galactica series from the 2000s,
right. It's a great series. I really like that series too. Revkev says his initial thoughts was that after having the Queen of Darkness rule for like 1,500 years, the world wasn't evil enough. It just felt like it did at the beginning of the Chronicles. I mean, I can't wholly disagree with that. We did get a little bit of like drippage about Kitiara turning on them, and so they had to sort of disband their little group for 5 years. But yeah, it didn't feel especially dangerous to me either. What about you guys?
I agree. In fact, I listed a whole bunch of positives about the book and some negatives, and that was one of the few negatives. If the Queen of Darkness had been in control for 1,500 years unopposed, it did kind of feel, why is Quail and Esty still around? And it feels like the beginning of the War of the Lance. Why are there any packets of knights left? It was very similar to the beginning of the War of the Lance without any justification for that, if she had a 1,500-year head start. So I do think one of the few negatives I had about the book, Revkev just pointed out. So yeah, I tend to agree with him on that.
Yeah. How did it land for you, Trampas?
So yeah, that was something I was thinking about, is like, if I'm Takesis, I'm the big bad of the world. Yeah. I have just won the 3rd Dragon War, which, if I recall correctly, went on for about 100 years anyway. And so I'm here like, okay, at this point, being the all-knowing, all-powerful goddess she is, she would make certain that Istar doesn't come about. She'd make certain that the Knights of Solamnia don't survive. I think she would have wiped all that out ahead of time, and I'm not even certain why there'd be dragon armies, draconians.
Yeah.
Unless she just felt like doing draconians anyway, just to keep the good dragons off her back. But
yeah, well, even that was a little bit odd, because if you have a foothold on this planet, the last thing you want to do is incentivize the good dragons to come fight you, and by taking and perverting their eggs, it seems like, well, that's justification for them to come and fight you. Like, why not leave the eggs alone and just keep them hostage, but not actually like corrupt them? That way, one, that keeps them in line, and two, it doesn't create an unnecessary reason for them to come overthrow you. It wasn't an issue in this version because that version of the lost battle or the lost war or whatever it's called never really was fully realized in the chaos timeline. It just got to the point where it was going to begin, but it alluded to it being completed in the unfinished book of Astinus, where he put down his pen and picked up his sword.
I love that quote.
Yeah. In my head, I was just like, every time we've ever seen Astinus, he's like in these, sort of visually depicted. He's got these like delicate robes and he's just sitting behind a desk writing and stuff. And I just imagine, because he is an avatar of a god, I imagine him just like jumping up and just bulging muscles, just like rippling out. And he's like, to war aesthetics. And they're just like, sir, we have work to do. We can't and just drop it all. Yeah, it was very, very funny. Hey, Jamie, thanks for tuning in. So, yeah, I mean, I didn't feel like the Takesis ruling the world for 1,000+ years was really fleshed out, which is strange because that's the whole setup of this entire novel. So it seemed like that would have been the most fleshed out. Like, okay, well, here are the different points in time that occurred, and maybe we don't discuss them for the sake of the story, but I would have loved to see just like a timeline breakdown of this timeline events.
Yeah, like, a lot of times in Weiss and Hickman books, they have an appendix.
Yeah.
And it would have been nice to say, okay, in the chaos timeline, here's what happened. Now the gods of good made, they rallied at this point, and then, maybe kept some stuff around, and maybe it took a while for things to happen, but just something to break it down and, kind of answer some questions that I think we all had,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, my headcanon as to why they went that route is they really did want to try to make it feel as familiar to fans of the original novel as possible. So it was a contrivance, sure, but I think they wanted it to feel like the beginning of the War of the Lands because they wanted to introduce Goldmoon and Riverwind. And so they kind of danced around it. It doesn't really make sense, but if you get the meaning of why they wanted to do it, to make you put you in that mindset. Yeah. Like I was able, to look past it myself. Maybe different fans feel more strongly about it, but
yeah, I definitely looked past it, like sort of not fleshing it out, and just sort of took it on. Took it on faith that it was going. It wasn't as important as the story that they were telling, the narrative that they were telling, and in that light, arguably it wasn't. How we got there is less important than how the hell we're going to get out of it, which is the point of the novel. So
yeah, it's kind of a dark reflection, really, rather than a timeline that naturally progresses.
It was also really weird because I just did a Dragonlance alternate timeline before the book came out, and then because that was in Legends of the Twins.
I hear the guy who wrote that is a complete jerk.
But and I thought it was a great alternate timeline. This felt very much like that. I was just like, oh man, they just stole his timeline.
No, they did it though, because now granted, it's been a while since I wrote it and reread it, and but if I remember right, yes, part of it was what if the dragon armies won the War of the Lance, but also part of it was that the tipping point, what happened differently is Sturm did not defend the High Clerist's Tower. He fled out of fear, and which is very much against his character. But alternate realities, these things happen. Yep. And that timeline, I had Kitiara who's there like, oh yeah, I'm in charge of this area and so powerful, and I'm bored. And I think that would be very much in character for her if she's doing administrative stuff and
100%.
Not kicking butt like she used to. So but it's nice to see the parallels. It's nice to see the differences and, just to see where different creative minds went. And certainly theirs are far greater than mine. So
definitely an opportunity for gaming product. I feel that'd be a lot of fun to play in this darker timeline.
Yeah.
If we could like flesh that out, that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure.
The chaos timeline, because ultimately all of these different timelines, they can currently exist whether they were like corrected or not. In your own sort of home games, you can do whatever they want and have as much fun as you want with these. And and I think revisiting these in like this campaign in a one shot or in a 4-parter or something like that would be a very interesting experience. A different take on it, as it were. I mean, this was a very much a close sort of through the looking glass variation of the Chronicles storyline, but there was some real difference in the past. Let's talk a little bit about some of the characters, because the whole trilogy is framed around Destina Rosethorn. She was in this for maybe 3 chapters out of the 44 chapters.
I think that's the biggest critique I have of the entire series. Is it's called Destinies. Her name is Destina. You would think she would have a much bigger impact. And I was waiting for her in this one to, take up the sword and kick some butt. And not so much. It was a lot of Raceland, a whole bunch of Tass. And I love Tass, don't get me wrong. But he kind of ran away with the plot, or borrowed it, as that may be. But it felt good later on in the story when other characters were involved, and it balanced out a little more, I thought.
Yeah, I have a similar point. Like I feel like with Destina, I did enjoy her story arc, and I liked the place that she ended up at the end.
Yeah.
But to me, one of my biggest critiques of the book and of the trilogy in general is the way the premise was set up. She was trying to go back in time to save her father. I feel this was a big missed opportunity. I wanted to see a scene where she confronted her father, even if it was after the lesson she learned and she simply was in disguise in full armor and just shook his hand and said, "Thank you for your sacrifice." No matter how that scene would have gone, if she tried to convince him to come away, or if she just recognized his sacrifice, I would have bawled my eyes out either way. I was gearing up for that moment, and it was just omitted. There was no confrontation. She learned the lesson on her own, which I, credit to her, but to not have that confrontation, I thought was the biggest miss of the trilogy.
I would have had that confrontation go slightly different. I would have had her seen her dad and say, "Oh, Father, you're back," and rush up to hug him. And turns out that because the timeline changed, he was a changed man and a very dark, evil man. And she would not have recognized him and said, "Oh my Lord,"
what did I do?
That's cool. I wasn't thinking that. I was thinking Field of Dreams, and you're thinking something cool and fun.
I love the idea of her coming to terms with her loss, which is what instigated the entire problem in the first place. But I don't even think it was ever addressed. I don't remember there ever being a moment where she was like, "Well, I'm glad that my father sacrificed himself for something that was greater than all of us. I'm sad that he's gone, but that's just, there was no sort of catharsis in her experience, in my opinion, because it was just never addressed. And so we just had to fill the gap in of, okay, well, the thing that started all of this has been resolved off camera, as it were.
There might have been a paragraph of that. Yeah.
Okay. I hope so. If not, I missed it.
I looked for it last night because I wanted to cite it. The closest I could find was something to the effect where she says, I found his legacy. His legacy has been in my heart.
Oh,
that's it.
I like that
she doesn't really, but she doesn't go into the details about his sacrifice, about why she realizes it was wrong to change. The only the closest we get is she talks about Sturm. She realized, Sturm's sacrifice, and I guess it's similar to her father's, but it's not really addressed in a satisfying way. So that to me was probably my biggest critique.
Yeah. Tasselhoff, how do you guys feel about Tasselhoff? He was the prime character. This should have been called Tasselhoff's trilogy. because, like Margaret was sort of joking around saying that the first novel was being bandied about being called Taz's wife. And yeah, that would have made sense in the first novel. In the second one, he was sort of all over the place, and I didn't really feel the vibe for him. In this one, I 100% bought him as a character. But he was the main character. We were seeing all of those wonderful moments that brought us to tears before through his eyes, knowing they weren't actually going to happen, or at least not in the way that they happened before. And so I really appreciated, seeing the sorrow and the sort of reactions that he was having. And I laughed out loud and I cried, and I had a really good time with it. But it was his book. Like, it wasn't Destina's. So do you guys mind having that much Taz in it?
I thought he dominated it for the first half of the book, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I don't feel like it was balanced. And at some point I'm like, okay, I'm having a little too much Taz time now, let's
you're checking your pockets.
Right. And so I'm just here like, surely someone else can pop in, do something interesting. But once we started getting those other characters in, that calmed down some. And I'd like seeing him addressing his grief, knowing that his grief over Sturm and Flint had not gone away, and that he's here like, I can fix this.
Yeah. And
it kind of seemed like he did. And
then the timeline changed.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're like, so is he fixed or is he not fixed?
I thought that was such a great scene where he hits Flint with the staff repeatedly in the stomach. I thought the way he was written was a real highlight. And I think especially coming off the first two novels, particularly the first one, where he acted so strangely and it almost was sad as a reader. It's like, did our favorite authors forget how to write Taz? So to see him redeemed in this, and redeemed meaning that it was him, it was the Taz that you remembered, reading as a youth. I absolutely loved it. I loved all the scenes. I loved the nod to the chaos, the summer flame, where he stabs the dragon in the foot.
Yeah,
that was a nice little homage to chaos when he I thought that was great. Like you said, his grief over his, his care over his friends, it felt genuinely like Taz. So I thought that was a highlight of the book, to be honest.
As a Dragonlance gamer, I was a little bit bugged when they brought up the whole, well, not every Kender is fearless, and Taz knows a lot of Kender who aren't fearless, and they're still like completely changing what the Kender actually are all meant to be until 5th age hits and we have the afflicted Kender. And so that really kind of bugged me, because it's you can't change it at this point. Like, we know who they are for 40 years. You can't just suddenly be like, oh, psych, Taz knows fear. No, it was a squirmy feeling in his gut. That's it.
In fact, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Chris.
I'm sorry. I was just going to add one point to that. I think what separated Taz from other Kender in the original, 6 novels wasn't the fact that he was fearless. It was the fact that he actually cared and had fear for his friends. So I thought that, kind of got pushed to the side, like you said, with the fearless comment. I'm sorry. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, that was my point exactly. So
thanks for tuning in, Jay. Good to see you. Hope your Shadow of the Dragon Queen campaign goes swimmingly.
Mine went great.
Pretty decent campaign. I'm still working on mine 2 years later. Can't seem to finish it.
No, I took the mega direct route, did no side quests, nothing, and took me about a year, but got through it, and might have skipped a chapter, but
nice.
Just the way
the Northern Wastes.
Totally skipped that. It's like, oh, the Flying Citadel's here. Well, let's go to the Northern Wastes. No.
Well, let's talk about some other characters. What about Sturm? We had this really great sort of reprisal of a seminal scene of his. How did you feel like Sturm was written? Did it feel like the Sturm, the curmudgeonly sort of, straight knight? Or did you like that he was smiling and laughing a little bit more in this?
it seemed pretty spot on to me. You know, there's points where it's like everybody's like, "Oh, we should leave," and he's like, "No, I'm going to go face this dragon now."
Yeah, yeah. Were you worried that he might bite it in that scene?
I kind of thought that history might repeat itself, you know, and I'm like,
I was thinking that too.
So I was a little surprised how it turned out, but
it seemed a little wacky to me. Like, I loved seeing Kitiara stand up to Sturm and basically get to the point where she's going to end his life, and then Flint runs in, just headbutts her in the gut, throwing her over the balcony, and then he falls over, and then Sturm grabs his ankle. Like, I was seeing all that in my head, and so I bought it all. But the Dragonlance to the chest of the dragon, I could see him crashing. I couldn't see it knocking him out that much because I know the game mechanics behind Dragonlances in old school D&D and in newer versions and stuff, and they just get weaker and weaker as the editions go on. And so I just couldn't see him being affected as much. But this version of Dragonlances, in this version of the storyline, they were saying that it was the only way to kill dragons was with Dragonlance. They were like immune otherwise. And I was just like, huh?
Nah.
I don't like that.
It's like, I have Wormsbane and Wormslayer here. Man, they're no good.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah, but I think that scene was one of the highlights for me, because if you think about it, when you see a rematch between Sturm and Kitiara and Sky or Ski, you're thinking that it's going to be Sturm. He's going to sacrifice, or if someone is going to defeat Kitiara, if you go down the list narratively, it's either going to be Sturm or maybe Tanis because of their relationship, or it's going to be Goldmoon. The last person you're thinking is going to be Flint. And I love that because it was such a surprise narratively that I didn't see coming. And sometimes those twists are really great.
Yeah.
But just as far as the way Sturm was handled in the book, I really did like it. The one thing I thought was missing is, to me, we got to know Sturm the most in the Lost Chronicles. His relationship with Laurana really brought out a lot of his personality and his love and respect for her. And Laurana in this was different, and they didn't really interact. So I thought we missed that. We did get the Tanis Sturm relationship, which I also loved. But I think not having Laurana and him interact, you end up omitting a large portion of his personality that I would have liked to have seen revisited.
I mean, he was pretty out of it when she was around. Yeah. I mean, he was like still on death's bed and like ready to go. So I understand why they didn't really have them interact very much, because he was, about to die. And they were trying to get back to him to heal him when she just sort of, showed up at the very end when he got healed and then took off with Goldmoon and Riverwind to Pax Tharkaz. So I don't know. For me, I've always liked Laurana. I've never, and I think she's a linchpin to the saga, but I've never really put her on a pedestal like a lot of other people have. And so the relationship dynamics between Tanis and Laurana in this particular story didn't bother me, because it's a different version of Laurana. It's not the same one. Same with, the only way that we would get that weird reflection acknowledged is through either Sturm or Tanis or Tasselhoff. And because Laurana didn't have the life experience memory, because she didn't travel through time. So I didn't mind that she was a different character and she approached things slightly differently, and her and Tanis's relationship was slightly different because it had been already slightly different. He stayed with her for like 5 years, and, she really thought they were already together, and he, in his headspace, is like, yeah, it's you, but it's not you. It's not the version of you that I desperately love. She
was almost like a Kaganesti, right? In a way.
Right.
A little like the lioness almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love Tanis feeling like he was cheating on her with
her. I mean, that is how it is, though, right? I mean, she's the same person, but she's not. And so you can't, she doesn't have all those memories and shared experiences that Tanis had with her in the different future. And I really love that. I love the dynamic and having it showcased so differently. And the fact that fans are divided and a little upset by it speaks to the strength of their relationship that has been told and is known, and the lack of that connection here. It just, I don't know, an interesting little flavor in my opinion. What do you think of Baccharis or Baccharis? He felt weirdly different to me. Like from their own writing, he felt different.
He's a punk.
He sucks. He 100% sucks.
You know, I'm reading him, and now granted, it's been a long time since I've read Chronicles, so I don't remember much of him from that. I do remember him from Shadow of the Dragon Queen, which, you know, obviously isn't them, but they made him seem a lot younger then. Here, I'm like, you're just a weasel, and how did you get to be where you're at, you know?
Yeah. Who did he pay to get such, so many pages in the novel?
At best, he should be a shoeshine boy. I mean...
Big Baccaris is really putting the screws on the authors. Like Big Corp.
So Trampas, you talked about how this felt like almost like a greatest hits, this novel. So I agree, and that's why this was a little disappointing that they focused so much on Baccaris, because it would have been a great opportunity to revisit, Verminard or Ariakis. I know you couldn't do Soth because the Cataclysm hadn't taken place.
Or did.
Although there might have been.
Still not sure.
I got the answer to that.
Okay.
Because in the hour just before this, I messaged Weiss and Hickman. And I'm thinking I'm not going to hear back until tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'm like, did the Cataclysm happen? And I figured it didn't, and she said no.
Oh,
Parker, said no. So there wouldn't be any Lord Soth. Of course, there wouldn't be any Solace, but we can hand wave that away.
Yeah. Oh man, what's the other one? The other Death Knight in the Fifth Age that just sucked.
Sir Krell.
Yeah.
Krell. Yeah.
Yes.
He's probably still going to happen. It seems like the.
Oh, I tell you, when I first saw his art, with the DLCS, I'm like, oh yeah, this guy's badass. I really love him. And then I read him, I'm like,
exactly. You're like, oh, you're not even a shadow of Soth. How dare you? You can't be in the same saga. Hey, Matthew, thanks for tuning in. You're about 40% through Autumn Twilight. Nice. Well, don't stick around. Oh, if you don't care about spoilers, it doesn't matter. Hope you enjoy it. That's one of those seminal fantasy books that turn people on to reading, not just Dragonlance. Okay, so yeah, I thought Baccaris was horrible, totally a different character. I like how they showcased evil turning in on itself, because that's a staple of Dragonlance. And so I didn't mind that. That felt real and true. It's just his character and his dialogue. I don't know. It just didn't really resonate with me. I do like the idea of spending a little bit more time with Arikas or with Verminard, but in the scope of the novel, I just couldn't see how they would do that without it feeling awkward. I do kind of want to bring up one really quick gripe about, I had mentioned earlier about the dragons and the Dragonlances being the only way to kill the dragons, but Immolatus was driven away because of a gnome machine blowing up. So they are vulnerable to gnome machines and Dragonlances, but nothing else? Just seems a little odd.
And Cyan Bloodbane was driven away by exercise.
Dude, that bothered. Can we talk about that for a second?
Calisthenics.
Because his whole character arc as we've ever known, I'm going to say Cyan Bloodbane, as we've ever known him, is he was drawn to the Dragon Orb in Sylvanesty and he tortured Lorak with it. And in this novel, he hears the word Dragon Orb and he's like, ah! It was almost like Scooby-Doo, like zoinks! And he just flies off. I'm like, wait a second. Your whole shtick is to get control of the Dragon Orb and twist the person. Why are you afraid of it all of a sudden?
Yeah.
It made no sense.
Oh, gosh. I'm here what made Cyan, or Cyan, however you pronounce it, cool, is he's a schemer, a mastermind. He's the guy whispering in the ear, kind of like Wormtongue in Lord of the Rings. And so he's doing all this. He's not being a big bad dragon kicking butt. He's playing mind games with you. And he's not doing that here,
He's not doing anything.
In fact, I thought I saw him down at the McDonald's earlier, but that's just me.
He just has a cartload. It looked like when Trump had McDonald's brought into the White House.
Oh, God.
He just brought that table. That was a thing in our lives I still reflect on from time to time. Okay. I did feel like I laughed more in this novel than I have laughed in a Dragonlance novel in a long time.
Yes.
like sort of like belly, chuckling laughs that I really appreciated, because these aren't comedies, but there are character and situations that encourage laughter and sort of heart. And I really felt that in this, and I needed to, as just a reader, being a little bit disappointed with the previous two, needing this one to nail the landing. I feel like it kind of did, for me. Did you guys like
Best in the
humor
series.
in it, or did it feel like there was a lot of humor?
Yes. Yes, I was laughing a lot. I think I might have had one point where I audibly gasped
Yeah.
at something, but I can't remember what that was.
Yeah.
But I just laughed. I'm like, "Oh, Taz, you silly boy."
You scamp, you.
Yeah, I thought Taz was the source of most of it, but there was also a lot of heart with him, where he kept saying he wanted to save the song. It sounds like a funny line, but there's a lot of beautiful meaning behind that for him, and just trying to restore the mistakes that they made. So I thought they really got the balance of heart and comedy correct. And to me, this was the best combination of that since the Legends trilogy. For me, this might be my favorite Dragonlance book since the original 6.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. So I had made a note in the review of this where I remembered an annotation about Tracy Hickman mentioning about a female Knight of Lamnia, and how they wanted to sort of re-explore that. Do you think this is a reimagining of that, or do you think that's just something else entirely? Do you know what I'm talking about?
There was, you had mentioned that there was a reference to a female knight by Astinus in one of the old books, where basically the female knight had lost her brother and father and had gained honorary knighthood, which was very rare. So I do think that those nuggets might have been in Tracy's mind for a long time. And I do like that connection. I like how Destina at the end is kind of honored for her, bravery in that moment, saving Huma. I like that. My one criticism is that it does ignore what I thought was a really great character in Reva Silvercrown.
Oh, right.
She was the hero of the entire, comic book run.
The DC comic line.
As a female knight. And to just ignore her like that, I just felt like, man, that's a wasted opportunity. But I get it. They really wanted to focus on telling their own story. They wanted to ignore Richard Nack's, Legend of Huma. They wanted to ignore all the peripheral stuff. So I understand it. But when I see something like that, I'm like, that would have been cool to kind of incorporate that as well.
Yeah.
Damn.
Did you think there was any connection at all to that, Trampas, or do you think it was just a whole different thing?
It could be one of those things that maybe it was like in the back of their minds, and it's like, oh, hey, well, we could take this opportunity to kind of make this actually happen, maybe change a few things because of the story, but no big deal. Dragonlance is full of legends, so little details can get off.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I loved it, though, to say, hey, there's now an advocate for women in the Knights of Solamnia, and the ladies are all wearing the red rose, with the white background or however that looks, and
exactly.
I would prefer the blue rose, but just looking at you, Lyncha, but but that's all right. I just thought that was kind of cool, and it's like, yeah, they have an advocate who's looking out for them, and it just adds a little something special.
I think, yeah, I mean, for me, the strength of the Knights of Solamnia were that it started this very rigid place, and through experience and sacrifice, it ended up in a completely different place, where they were a little bit more rational when it came to the measure interpretation. They were a little more open with who could become a Knight of Solamnia. And anytime you have, and this is just me having been raised by women and having, a wife and daughter, anytime you can showcase female empowerment in a non-ham-fisted way, I think is important. And I think it should be a consideration. I'm a huge horror film fan, and it's called a final girl for a reason. They're the only ones that survive against the impossible bad guys. So I like that aspect of storytelling, and I enjoyed that this was a moment. Hello.
That's Andy.
Is that for me? I'll take it. I'm hungry. I like that that's an aspect of it, right? I mean, you can, in my personal opinion, you know, like Rise of Skywalker and stuff, with Rey, I didn't feel like that was as earned, her being as powerful as she was. But this, like, I like the idea of the struggles that Destina went through. I don't think she was a Mary Sue at all. She constantly failed and tripped up and learned lessons and grew. And I think that's the best version of a hero story, because that's what every hero story is you start from a position of moderate to severe ignorance and then you grow. And that's what we try to do as human beings and adults. And we try to do our best to become better versions of ourselves. And I feel like she did that in this. And then to see the Knights of Solamnia reflect back on her sacrifice, and then they themselves change in a similar way, a same version of a change that we saw already in the main timeline. I dug it. I really liked it. I don't mind.
I liked with Destina that at the end, it felt like the end of the hero's journey, where the end of it is you come home, but you're changed.
Yep.
That was her.
100%. What do you guys think of Uncle Trapspringer? I was shocked.
Which one?
I was shocked that Uncle Trapspringer showed up in this. It felt weird in the time. And
I think they broke so much canon up until that point that for me it was just like, okay. Like, I think if that had happened in the first of the trilogy, I would have been like, that makes no sense. It's out of place and time, obviously. But I think at this point I had been so battered by the canon breaks that it was just like, you know, I rolled with the punches, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just thinking, okay, wasn't he a gnome from like the past in the last one, and now here he is. He's a kinder again, but something blew up. Okay, that's fine. But he kind of looks over and gives kind of a wink and nod to Destina and Karen, and I'm like, that's reorcs. That's gotta be reorcs. And I should not have asked Margaret and Tracy about it. But Margaret's like, oh, reorcs would never, and maybe she put me on, but she was like, he'd never take the form of a kinder, you know. And I'm here like, I don't know about that. I kind of like the idea that maybe that was an avatar of reorcs.
I wouldn't mind that either, to be honest.
I mean, maybe Uncle Trapspringer is like a legend, not a person like you see in, what was the book, Kindermore?
Yeah. I mean, he had his own novel, too.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. I mean, he's established. But I don't know. I like the idea of him being a legend as well. And maybe even, you know, a god like Reorc's leveraging that legend just for fun. Because we didn't see him in this at all. You know, we got Paladine, we got a touch of Mishakal. I always try to like force myself to say it the official right way, but I never can.
Oh gosh, I said it Mystical for years, and then I meet Margaret Wise, and she said Mishakal, and I'm like, well, that's different. And
every time I hear the authors say things a certain way, I try to adjust to that, but it doesn't always work.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We just don't get a lot of reorcs. You know, I brought him into my Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen campaign in a sequence that I felt like had a little emotional resonance in it, with characters dying and him bringing them to the Gate of Souls and sort of singing the Dwarven war song, you know, as sort of the end of it, and trying to have this really kind of great divinity moment, which Dragonlance is known for. We don't really get a lot of, you know, we had reorcs stop in at the first book, but that was even like a weird sort of version of him. So I don't know. I like the idea that he was Trapspringer in that case, because let's be honest, in the second edition Time of the Dragon box set version of reorcs, he took humans up to Taladas, taught them how to be like scions ostensibly and like elemental like movers and shakers and stuff. And then it was like they like created gnomes and dwarves out of them. The dwarves came down, founded a bunch of different Calthaxes, and the gnomes came down as well. That's how you have the Nomoi up in Taladas and stuff. Before the Grey Gem like changed everyone when it flew down here in Ansalon. So depending on the version of the history you want to go with, whether it's first edition or second edition or reinterpretations in third and on, Reorx has been involved pretty heavily with humans, gnomes, and dwarves. So I wouldn't mind seeing him do that.
Yeah, you could make the case that of all the gods, Reorx was the one that was most connected to Krynn. Like he's the only one that doesn't supposedly leave the people. Like the dwarves still believe in him after the cataclysm. Obviously, he was very involved with the Grey Gem and just the forging of the world. So you could make a case that he's the most closely connected to Krynn and deserved a little more time in this third novel for sure. Yeah.
I think the three gods of magic might disagree, but because they're inextricably linked with mortals on Krynn more than almost anyone else, simply because magic, you know.
What'd you think of that scene where the three gods came down and killed Mother and the other one that killed Magus?
Yeah. First of all, I don't like
Commander.
the idea of people not having names.
Yeah.
They presented this group. I can't remember what they're called now, like Garouche or something. But whatever it was, whatever the tribal group of them was referred to as, it felt like it was almost, you know, from Dragons of Summer Flame with Eric is going and getting the brutes and coming back over. But then in this, they sort of described them just as like mercenaries. I was like, oh, that's a little. They presented them as almost otherworldly in the previous novel, and now they're just basic mercenaries. And then, like Mother and Commander seemed so powerful. I just can't imagine why the gods would kill them before Magius was killed. If they're going to kill them at all, why didn't they stop them from killing Magius? I don't see how Magius is. Because we don't have the version of Huma's story from Margaret Weiss and Jason Hickman, how it supposedly happened the first time in full flesh. We just have hints and poems. We don't really know the dynamic and importance of Magius's loss on Huma. I did like how they touched on it in this novel, and you can't really grieve in a time of war. You just don't have the luxury of it. And so I like the amount of time they gave to it. It felt real, it felt earned and necessary. But does he have to die for the third Dragon War to be won? You know, I mean, if the gods are going to intervene like that as a sort of retribution on killing him, if he was so important to them that they would act like that, because we've never seen the gods strike anyone down before.
Right.
I don't know. It felt off and weird. How did it land for you, Trampas?
In some ways, I liked it because I'm here like, oh, you just took their boy out, you know, and you know, it's like, yeah, we're going to let free will go on, but now you done pissed us off, you know. Now, granted, I think Magius kind of went out like a chump anyway, because he's supposed to be this great mage, and these guys, you know, I always imagined his final battle being some great thing against some powerful other wizard, and he just was defeated and, you know, without any magic to defend himself. And of course, very first edition, second edition there, because now we have cantrips. And but you know, I did kind of like that they worked together in their own way, and they just got rid of them like, you done messed up. You know, this is our champion right here.
Yeah. It is a very different version of Magius, you know? I mean, because in the Knack one, he was a renegade. Like, he worked for the bad guy for a while.
He was like just about every color robe you could imagine in that one. Yeah. And it is weird reading two versions of that same basic story. And the way I resolve it in my head is that this is ancient Krynn. This is like saying, okay, what's the one true story of King Arthur? Well, there's been so many written you don't know. And so, that's how I resolve it in my head.
Yeah. Did like Rev Kev's note? He's all, it's like the magic god zapping them felt like Ghost Yoda zapping trees. So Chris, you were saying you had brought that up. How did it land for you?
Yeah, I just felt like I like when the gods allow for autonomy and free will. I feel like the more the gods involve themselves, and granted, this has been the case from the very beginning of Dragonlance with Fizban literally starting everything in motion in
like
the end.
Moving furniture.
Yes, exactly. Right. And telling the guards to get them and just starting the whole thing. So it's not like this is something new. So I'm okay with it. It just, for me personally, the more the gods are involved in the story, the less relevance and autonomy the actual companions and the characters have. So I don't like to see them come down and strike a person, because then it takes away free will. That again, that's just my take on it. But it has been part of Dragonlance from the beginning. So,
I mean, the anthropomorphized version of the gods of magic, I always liked the idea that they were personifications of the moons. They didn't have a physical form like Fizban or something. They were just entities up to themselves, these mystical beings that just sort of resonated as the moons themselves. So it wasn't until Lost Chronicles, I think, that we got the first anthropomorphized version of the three gods, like coming down and interacting with Raistlin. I didn't like the idea that they're just on call for Dalamar. Like, Dalamar's like super powerful and stuff, but he's not Raistlin. I feel like he's just not quite that important, but apparently he is.
Why is he reporting to them and not just Darius,
Right. Leader of the Conclave. I mean, at this point in time, who is the leader of the Conclave at this point in time? Is it just Darius?
I would think it would be around the time that he took over.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, I don't know. It sort of stripped away Go ahead.
They went to Alice Raniker, Justarius, and Dalamar. So I think Justarius was in charge. Yeah.
I did like how bothered Justarius was getting with Alice. He was just like, I'm done with this.
You're doing magic wrong. I'm still doing magic.
I really don't like it when they sort of like cheekily throw in modern science and technology into this, and they're like, but that would mean you would have to have a telephone line, a wiretap line on your end to get this wire transfer messages, and it's like, let's just keep it fantasy, can we? Just like, is that I understand
that's
the gnomes,
good for gnomes,
yeah. But she was like, I don't know. She was figuring stuff out, doing like laundry arms and stuff. I was just like, is Alice a gnome? Like, I don't understand what's going on here.
She's very much a human, but her bloomers are out for display.
Yeah.
I thought there was a possibility that she was Avatar of Reorx, because the things that she could do were just so otherworldly.
Right.
Like if all the masters of magic and the heads of the conclave can't make this device, but she could do it over a weekend, earlier than they expected. Like, who is she? So I hope, Margaret Weiss's book comes to pass. I do want to find out. I'm very curious about who she actually is.
Yeah, because we don't really have any information about her father, just that he was an amazing magic item manufacturer. I don't know. Creator?
The grandfather.
Grandfather, yeah.
Artificer.
Artificer, yeah. So, I don't know. I would also like to learn a little bit more about this character, because she felt like a mix between a Kender and a gnome with her behavior and ability to build things and then have them just defunctly not work. And yet she could do a brand new device of time journeying and, apparently fix the clock. And like, she could just do everything except for clothes washing. Apparently, just didn't really quite land for me.
She can't cast basic spells, but yet she can fix the device of time journeying or create that prison that the Great Gem's in. Oh, that prison!
Let's talk about that, because
I love it.
I thought it was a great concept. The idea of him staring off into infinity, sort of pacifying himself.
Yeah, it's just staring off into infinity, and then. Oh, beyond that, let's also put him in another dimensional space.
Yeah.
He won't come out of it this time, and 20, 30 some odd years later on the Isle of the Urda, you know, there's, but anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, I really enjoyed that.
Mm-hmm. It does lead to the next step of the conversation, but let's start with just the gray gem aspect of it, because the gray gem is chaos, and it felt inconsistent in its motivations, which lined up with chaos. And so because it wasn't able to be anticipated in what it would do, because it just sort of randomly did random stuff, I bought it. I didn't need it to want to get into Tiki's hands. I liked that it was like trying to contact her, and it was like, oop, nope, never mind. I don't want her to have me. And it's like sort of second guessing its own choices. But it's chaos. That's what chaos is supposed to do. So did it work for you, or did it feel a little convenient with its motivations? Whomever.
I thought that it was because it's basically neutral. Like it sways back and forth, pretty chaotically, obviously. So I like the fact that it didn't seem to want to take control necessarily or want to help them. It was like it played it right in the middle. It just kind of wanted to survive and just mess things up. I thought that was good. I really liked the way they ended it, like you said, with that device. I thought that was a great way to tie up loose ends. The only thing that I don't like about it is one of my favorite aspects is the fifth age, and this really does make you think that the fifth age would not come to pass, obviously, if the gray gem isn't involved. So that kind of bothered me as a big fan of the fifth age. I wanted to get your guys' take on that.
I'm curious of Trampas, because I've shared my thoughts on this. I haven't heard yours.
Okay, so first of all, I like chaos as being embodied by the gray gem more than I like chaos as the 12-foot giant fiery god, because if we needed a chaotic fiery god, well, we've got Sirion, we don't need that. But what I liked is just this thing in the world that just causes things to mess up, something that is and isn't at the same time. And that much I liked. Now, as far as the timeline moving forward, and are we okay?
Yeah, let's
talk about that now. Okay. So, Adam, I was watching your other video, your review, and you're kind of talking about this kind of negating that, and that wasn't the vibe I got. The vibe I got was that it could happen still, or maybe not. It kind of leaves it open, and surely,
because of the clock ticking, because the clock was ticking, that makes you think that it could go either way.
I don't know if it was that or not, but just I forget who said it, but someone was saying something that made me think, okay, this could go either way. And so, if you're a Dragonlance fan that likes the Age of Mortals, the early Fifth Age stuff, all that stuff can still happen. This does not negate anything that any author previously did. What it also does, though, is it recenters the timeline from that future date back to that post-Legends era, which I think, and this is just anecdotal evidence here, but I think is the favorite of most Dragonlance fans. For me, it was great because, like, as a gamer, the world's mine now. I can do with it what I want. And so, and yeah, we could do that anyway, but it's almost like we're given the okay that, yeah, you can go do this now.
Right. Yeah, the only way in my headcanon that it could actually still happen is if someone went back in time before it was thrown in ostensibly a black hole by the gods of magic and stopped it before it could be put into that infinity mirror and been swallowed away. Then they could then go forward and, have the Chaos War happen. But without chaos, there's no Chaos War. Without Chaos War, there's no reason for the gods to leave, and Tikis is able to steal the world away, so there's no Fifth Age. Like, that's how I'm sort of like A to B to C. But you could always write it so they go back before that point and get it and still have the same outcome. I just don't know why. I do feel like it was a course correction on Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman's plate, because because it was left open for interpretation slightly, I do feel like they're saying, look, if you liked how that all happened, it could still happen. If you didn't like how it happened, it doesn't have to happen. It's up to you instead of, an established, series of novels that you may or may not like. So definitely whatever you want to do as a gamer, speaking to anyone watching this, have it play out however you want. In my headcanon, it stopped the Chaos War, and I don't necessarily mind that because, again, like you, Trampas, this is my favorite era. And I love the idea of still being able to see the Knights of Takhisis, because they were coming in before Chaos ever came in, seeing them invade the continent and having that be the next major conflict. How do the Tarmac brutes, sort of clash with the Minotaurs in that sort of situation? We still going to have the Minotaurs? They've always wanted to invade Sylvanesty. So, how is that going to turn out? And you can sort of spin it off in some really fun places for a nice Dragonlance campaign in this new version of the timeline that I think they set up.
And see, for the gamers, what's cool is they can go look at Legends of the Twins. There's 6 alternate timelines in there anyway, so lots of fun stuff to explore. Now, we talked about Dragonlance, but there's 2 other ones that I think would be great here. First of all, if you love the Knights of Takhisis, such as yours truly, you can play the War of the Darklance alternate timeline. Again, I hear the author of that is a real jerk. Just terrible guy. But anyway, that's something that it's kind of a different take. It's like, well, instead of a summer that's hot, what if you had a summer of frost? And then you have Icewall Glacier moving north. You've got the Knights of Takhisis. You've got the Minotaurs invading Krynn. And all this stuff is going on. No chaos in sight. And how it ends, well, that's up to you. And and we corrupt Dragonlances as well. So that's kind of a nice thing too. The other timeline, real jerk guy again, is the Age of Dragons. And this is kind of the future that Tasselhoff sees before he goes back and then goes to the Fifth Age future that we are familiar with, And this is kind of a what if the Fifth Age never happened? And if you remember back to Dragonlance Adventures, the timeline starts a new age with the War of the Lance, as it should, I think. And with that, that was called the Age of Dragons. So I called that timeline the Age of Dragons. Now, it moves everything forward. It has a lot of political feel to it. So, it's like everybody knows there's a war coming, but nobody wants to do it. And kind of a Cold War feel. So those are just 2 possibilities. And there's hundreds, if not thousands more.
Yeah. I think it's great. I love how, arguably sometimes the fans come up with the best options, because they're so close to it. They know every little tidbit. They're like, yo, but what if? And that spirals out the imagination going as well. Really quick, Bears fan Goomba, thanks for tuning in live. Good to see you, man. Alex B from Italy, how you doing? Thanks for tuning in.
Hey.
That's awesome.
Engine Joe, always great to see you. So, I don't know. Like, just in my headcanon, it erased it. I don't care if someone disagrees. I think, interpret this however makes you happy. There's so much in life to make you unhappy. Let's not let Dragonlance be one of them. So just, interpret it however so that you dig it. And quite frankly, I'm okay with that. I don't mind at all, because I think any version of Dragonlance is better than no version of Dragonlance. So whether it resets the timeline or not, don't care. Interesting thoughts, sort of like the next step, though, because if the timeline continues and we do see the Knights of Takhisis, could Mina show up? Could she be a thing? She was only woken by Takhisis because Takhisis was sort of weak and unable to act on her own. I don't know. Did you guys like Mina enough to, in your own headcanon, have her pop up in the progression of the timeline? What do you think, Travis?
I like Mina.
Yeah.
I liked her better as a cleric than as a god.
Yeah.
But still, I like both incarnations of her. I don't know that she shows up though, because the one thing she was kind of, even though she wasn't created for War of Souls, she was developed for War of Souls and feels very tied to that storyline. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if she would show up or not. And quite honestly, I know she's supposed to be both good and evil. That always seemed a little messy to me. And I just thought that she really throws off the balance because, yeah, maybe she doesn't interact, but there's like this little asterisk saying for now, because something will bring her in. So I don't know that I want her in this timeline. Do the Knights of Takhisis make a return? Maybe. Maybe Weiss and Hickman will write that trilogy they always wanted to write, but hard to say at this point.
Yeah, I'd be here for it. What do you think, Chris?
I would love to see her. I thought she was a great character. I love the idea that there's this perfectly balanced pantheon of gods and that she threw the balance off. I think you could have a really creative story with Mina where she does turn good, but Paladine realizes how important the balance is. He sacrifices himself similar to the way he does when he turns into the elf, when he turns mortal. Valthonis, thank you. Yeah. So that could be a cool storyline where he just, takes himself out of the picture, allows her to take up the mantle of a god of good and keep the balance. That could be an interesting storyline.
I always liked how Mishikal stepped in as like the warrior god for Paladine's in the vacuum of Paladine, like in the Fifth Age. I always liked the aggressive side of her. Again,
it's like we're putting down our healing kits and taking up the sword,
Yeah. I'll heal you when we're done whipping some tukas. For sure. Hey, Dark Angel, great note there. I don't want to rain on anyone's parade. Do you all think Kaz the Minotaur will make any showing in War Wizard?
No.
Yeah, I don't think so either, Chris.
Unfortunately, I think they made their stance pretty clear on that. Yeah. Unfortunately.
First of all, War Wizard takes place before the Legend of Huma.
Right.
So Kaz would not have been introduced there anyway. The other thing is Weiss and Hickman, their thing with those characters is that it's Huma and Magius. Mm-hmm. It's like Arthur and Merlin. That's kind of their thing there. And Kaz is a great character, one of my favorites. Yeah. But he's definitely a Knack character, and I don't see anybody else writing him.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine it. It would be one thing. It's one thing to say that's your version of the Legend of Huma, and this is ours. It's another thing to then take their character and then change him and stuff. Like, that's crossing a line. So I could not see them doing that. I think they'll just ignore him, and he just won't be involved at all. The reality is like, I don't, you had just mentioned they're like King Arthur and Merlin. That's the tale that got me into fantasy in the first place before I even knew about Dragonlance. As a very young little boy, I remember inappropriately watching Excalibur and just being like, yes, this is amazing for more than one reason, but it was dope. And like,
there's parts of it that wouldn't fly today.
Yeah, no. But like, I love the fact that the legend of King Arthur, and one of the wonderful members of this Dragonlance community pointed it out in one of my commentaries as well, that, look, there's a whole bunch of different legends and versions of the King Arthur tale. Why can't there be just as many of Legend of Huma? And like, okay, you frame it like that, I'm there for it. I believe in that idea. Because it is one of the most enduring tales that does change slightly through each retelling, and, just sort of injected with the modern lens of the individual writing it and their personal likes and dislikes. Why not with someone like Huma and Magius, who lived a millennia and 300 years before the Heroes of the Lance? Like, Yeah, that's enough time to have a whole bunch of versions of, of what really happened.
Right?
So I dig that.
I think as long as you have the DNA of the character, which is he was a knight of the crown, someone of low standing. He was open-minded compared to the rest of the knighthood, who was so rigid, and made the ultimate sacrifice. I think as long as you hit on those 3 beats, then you could have freedom to change it up.
Yeah. All right. So what about your guys' notes? Anything that you want to bring up that we haven't talked about thus far?
I had one question. Sorry, Trip.
Go ahead.
I had one question that I wanted to bring up, and I wanted to get your take on. This is a little bit more of a deep dive, but one of the things that bothered me was the scene with Caramon, where he sacrifices his soul in order to transport to Raceland. At the time that I read that, I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to have implications when he comes back to the original timeline, because I view the soul as like, beyond time.
They present it that way too.
Yeah. So the fact that they didn't address it, and it was almost like a non-issue the rest of the way, I thought was disappointing, but it also got me thinking, like, beyond the scope of this, like, what do you think would have happened to him? That was a major decision he made, and it never got paid off.
That could have been a whole new story right there, Raceland going to fix that, and or somebody offering Zebulon something else in exchange. That
would have been great.
I mean, that would have been cool, but it's kind of like hand waved. So yeah, I'd say that was one of my criticisms as well.
Yeah, that is, reading that, you're just like, wow, that is such a huge, because Sturm and Raceland, their souls are the ones from as far into the timeline as possible, and they all have all that knowledge, but they're stuck in the version of themselves that's younger. If the soul's eternal and it exists outside of the river of time, then yeah, Caramon would be screwed. But he would have made the same choice 1,000 times over. So you bring that up, Trampas. I would love to see almost like a Beowulf version of a tale of Raceland going in to take his brother's soul back. Like a reimagining of the Legends trilogy. Instead of him going to take out Takhisis, he's going to reclaim his brother's soul. And that's the version of Raceland that we have at the very end, the one that has a little bit of self-awareness and does show affection to his brother. He's going to wait for him in the afterlife until they can leave together. I like that idea a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And make fun of Caramon the whole time that he's taking him out of the abyss.
Yeah. Rebkev says he would have loved something more about Raceland apologizing to Caramon that was hinted at. And Raceland even makes a note, I think of I can't remember exactly. My interpretation of it was that he was going to, tell Caramon how much he appreciated him and stuff, and he just never got around to it. But I don't know. Did you guys feel like that would have been a good moment between the two characters? Or would have been premature for the character development?
I mean,
Go ahead, Travis.
I think it'd be fine, I don't know.
Yeah. My take on it was that it's almost like when you haven't seen a loved one in a long time, and in your head, all of their annoying mannerisms disappear because you miss them. And then after you're with them for 10 minutes, all of a sudden, all the things that you didn't like about them come back. That's how I felt Raceland was around Caramon. I think the very beginning, when he first sees him, he's apologetic in his mind, and he's like, I have a lot to atone for. And then 10 minutes later, of Caramon just being on top of him and kept,
yeah.
Just I don't know. That was just my spin on it.
That works for me too, to be quite honest, because I definitely identify with those experiences 100%. Travis, did you have something?
Two things. One, I like that Destina got her super mega happy ending. I had a Wayne's World moment there, so glad to see that things worked out to where she gets to keep her keep, rebuild things. It's all in her name now. Her and Krynn are getting married, and he's going to be like the librarian there. That's great. They've got everything good with the dragon, the townspeople, all that's great. And it's like, great, happy ending. Her story is done. And I don't anticipate seeing her again.
I don't think so.
But that's okay. That's okay. Her story's told. But I think the other thing I liked was the very ending where Tass just got on the road again and was saying, well, going forward to the next adventure, or however he phrased it. And I'm just here with a tissue like, man, I got the sniffles. And
yeah. Well, I liked how he was like asking is like, how come I can remember all this stuff and no one else can? He's like, you're blessed by the gods. We like you. You're all right, kid.
Yeah, and the thing is you're sitting there like, which gods? Margaret Watson, Tracy Hickman. That's who.
Yeah. He's also cursed in a way, though, because no one will believe his stories, right?
But they never did anyway. Like the woolly mammoth.
Yeah.
And he still can't say Grey Jim.
Yeah, that's the best part. Like, great. Even though time and stuff has changed, he's still like stuck from the previous spell.
Right.
And Gwyneth, how dare you? I thought that was pretty funny too. So with the timeline as it stands after the book, does that mean twins books don't happen? Well, the legends, which I think is what you're referring to with the twins book, Dark Angel, that happened before all this. So that still occurs because the ending of this novel in the current timeline, in my interpretation, is after the Blue Ladies War, before the Summer of Chaos, and that's where it ends right there.
So, right, because Tannen and Sturm had just been born.
Right.
Yeah, so that's definitely in that.
And maybe we could see them getting killed.
Instead of off camera, yeah.
I want to see that scene.
That would be an interesting battle because it was like shock and awe. Like Tanis the whole time is like, you guys have to prepare for war. This thing is huge. And the Knights of Salamina are like, whatever. And they go to and they just get decimated by the Knights of Tegesis and the Tarmac. Like, I definitely want to read that battle. I think that would be really, really interesting. And we only got a snippet of it. And I just didn't feel like it was enough.
I would love to see Tannen and Sturm fighting together, and Palin there with his magic and all of them working in tandem.
Yeah.
Be cool.
It'd be our Avengers moment.
Right.
Yes.
Quit treating Palin like he's a second-class mage. This is Raceland's legacy right here. It's his nephew. He's got the staff. This guy should kick butt.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
100%. Well, gentlemen, we're over an hour. Is there any last thoughts you want to toss out there about this book?
I'll go so the Trampas can get the final word, or you can get the final word. I just want to say, like I said, overall, I know we picked at some of the negative parts of it, but overall, like I said, it really felt like going home. It felt like a love letter to the fans. I felt it come through the pages. The one aspect, besides the fact that it was great to see the companions again, is there was also a message that was a beautiful message in the story about sacrifice. And Adam, I know coming from a military background, you probably have a better take on this than I do. But the fact that her father's life had meaning, and she got to Destina got to see that without his sacrifice, and I think she made a comment that said something like a one life could be like a drop of water, but it could inspire others, and soon that drop of water becomes a river. And I just think that it was so beautiful, and it's analogous to our world with World War II, Normandy. Like the sacrifice one or two people made inspired others to also stand their ground and save the world from evil. And this book, as much as it is fantasy and silly, also showed what can happen if you take those few sacrifices away. And so I really love that aspect. It had a lot of heart and a lot of meaning, besides the fact that it was just great to see old friends again.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely beautiful. Yeah, I think that's one of the aspects of this sort of saga that is so powerful because it does resonate in the real world with our own real experience. You have those individual moments of pain and loss that inspire social movements, whether it's the women's suffrage movement or whether it's racial riots or whether it's gay or trans movements. I mean, you have these moments of horror that occur that then are reacted to socially, that sort of spreads out and entirely changes the way that we perceive our world and the way that we embrace those in the world. I like that trajectory, and I like stories that focus on that, and that's probably one of the tiny little aspects that I never really considered before you bring it up, before you brought it up. That's one of the things I love about Dragonlance. So Trampas, any final thoughts from you?
I think Chris nailed most of what I was going to say.
That's why I go first.
Yeah, I mean,
stole your notes.
Really?
Damn.
So I love seeing the companions again. And it's like they have that one last fight, and I love that theme. I liked a lot of the timeline stuff. I do question how it can be noon in one time and noon in the past at the same time, but whatever, hand wave that. But I laughed a lot in this book. I kept reading it. It was a page turner. I enjoyed it. I felt like it had a lot of heart. I feel like out of the whole trilogy, it's the best one by far.
Yep.
And I just kind of like where it left off. Like, yeah, the world's at this new reset, and it's a good place to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to see what happens next.
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely going to be doing a game session or two in this timeline to push it on to the next, because I agree with you. I think this is a great place to end the trilogy. Best book of the trilogy by far, I think. I think we all agree with that. I'm not sure if everyone in the audience does, but that's okay. We don't have to agree on everything. But that is going to have to do it for this episode. Let us know what you guys thought of Dragons of Eternity. Are there aspects of it that we were not able to get to that you wanted to speak to? Put them in the comments, and we'll all try to respond to them in our own time. Thank you all so much for joining me on this hangout. Gentlemen, I really do appreciate your time and your consideration about Dragonlance, and of course sharing your passion of it with the rest of us. It's nice to have other friends who really care about stuff like this when
Absolutely
there's so much darkness out there in the real world. We can at least escape here for a little joy.
Yeah. Like, I know for me, oh gosh, I'm prolonging this. I know for me, this last year has been extremely rough, and with a lot of stuff going on. But this brought me joy. It brought me, honest to goodness, joy. And I felt like I was young again. Like, yeah, this is the Dragonlance I love.
Yeah, that's great.
Beautiful.
Well, I would like to remind everyone watching to subscribe to the channel. Go check out Dragonlance Nexus as well. Subscribe there. Like the video. And if you appreciate what we're doing here, share it. Tell someone about it. And that just goes to help other people learn about this channel and Dragonlance as a whole. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Until next time, for everyone here, Slanjavar. Oh yeah, Boom Mannequin 21. Go check out that channel. That's Chris's kid. Go check it out.
My son makes me.
You have merch and stuff. All right, everyone. Take care. Slanjavar. That's what I should have said.